In this very lesson, we shall be looking at how to find the inverse of a 3 by 3 matrix. To find the inverse of a 3 by 3 matrix, we are going to follow the same steps that is used to find the inverse of a 2 by 2 matrix. So I have written down the steps to help us find the inverse of the 3 by 3 matrix. So let's go through it. First of all, we find the determinant of the matrix. Secondly, we find the cofactors of the co-matrix of the matrix. Then thirdly, we find the adjoint of the matrix by transposing the co-matrix. And then lastly, we find the inverse of the matrix using this formula. So let's find the inverse of what? Matrix A. And we realize that, or we can see that this matrix is what? A 3 by 3 matrix. So the first thing that we are supposed to do is what? Find our determinant. So we have determinant of what? Matrix A. Now we have already learned how to find the determinant of a 3 by 3 matrix. If you have forgotten, please kindly go back and then watch. So to find the determinant of a 3 by 3 matrix, we are going to choose any rule. So let's choose the first rule. Then we are going to multiply each entry on that rule by its cofactors. So we are going to multiply each entry on that rule by its cofactors. So when we collapse this, we will left with 3 times negative 1 will give us negative 3. Then we have minus 2 times 1 will give us what? Minus 2. Then we have minus. We are talking about cofactors, so this is going to be plus, minus, plus. So the second entry will take what? A minus. So it means we are going to collapse the second column and then the first row. So we'll be left with 2 times 3 will give us 6, minus 3 times 1 will give us what? 3. Then move on to the last entry, we have plus 2. So we collapse the first row and then the last column. So we'll be left with 2 times negative 2 give us negative 4. 3 times minus 1 will give us what? Minus 3. So let's continue. Let's do some simplification. So we have minus 3 plus 2 minus 2. 6 minus 3 give us 3 plus 2 minus 4 plus what? 3. So when you do your simplification, you are going to have your determinant to be what? 9. Let me write it here. Minus 9, sorry. So after finding our determinant, so this is our determinant which is minus 9, we move on towards, we find the cofactors of the matrix. So before we can find the cofactors, we have to first find our minus. Then we apply our signs. So let's find the minor of the first row and then the first column. So with that, we are going to collapse the first row and then the first column. So we will left with minus 1, 1, and then minus 2, and then 3. Then after that, we find the determinant of this. So this is going to give us minus 3 plus 2. So we have minus 1. Then we move on to the minor of the first row and then the second column, which is this. So it means we are going to collapse the first row and then the second column. So we'll be left with what? 2, 2, 1, and then what? 3, 3. Then we find the determinant. This will give us 6 minus 3. We have what? 3. Then we move on to the minor of the first row and then the third column. So which is this very part. We are going to collapse the first row and then the last column. So we'll be left with 2 minus 1. Then after that, we find the determinant. This will give us minus 4. This is going to give us what? Plus 3. So we have minus 1. So then we move on to the minor of the second row and then the first column. So we are talking about this entry. So we are going to collapse the first column and then the second row. So we'll be left with 2, 3. So 2, 2, and then negative 2, and then 3. we find the determinant. This is going to give us 6 plus what? 4, and this will give us what? 10. Then we move on to the minor of the second rule, and then the second column. So where is the second rule, the second column? So second rule, second column. So we are talking about this entry. So we are going to collapse this row and then this column. So we'll be left with what? 1, 2, 3, 3, because we are collapsing this, we are collapsing that. So 1, 2, 3, 3. Then we find the determinant. This will give us 3. This will give us what? Minus 6. So we have what? Minus 3. Then we move on to the second row and then the third column. So we are going to collapse the second row and then the third column. We'll be left with 1, 2, 3, negative 2. This is going to give us minus 2, and then this will give us minus 6, and then we have what? Minus 8. Let's look at. So we are looking at what? The minor of the third row and then the first column. So this is the third row and then the first column. So we are going to collapse this and then the last row. So we'll be left with 2, 2, negative 1, 1. Then we find what? The determinant. This will give us 2. This will give us what? Positive 2. So we have 4. Then we move on to M3, 2. That is the minor of the third row and then the second column. So we are going to collapse what? The third row and then the second column. So this is the third row, the second column. We'll be left with 1, 2, 2, 1. Then we find the determinant. This and that will give us 1. This will give us what? Minus 4. So we have minus 3. Then let's look at the minor of the third row, the third column. So when you collapse the third row, the third column, this is the third row and this is the third column. So we have 1, 2. So this will give us minus 1. And then we have minus 4. So we have minus 5. So we are done with what? The minus. So the minus we have negative 1, 3, and then negative 1. Then we have 10, negative 3, negative 8. Then we have 4. So this is the minus of what? Matrix A. To find our co-matrix or the cofactor, we are just going to multiply this minus by these signs arrays. Plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus. And when we do that, we are going to have our co-matrix to be, so we have minus 1, minus 3, minus 1. So this is the co-matrix of matrix A. So the next thing to find is what? To find our adjoint. Now we can find the adjoint by finding or the transpose of the co-matrix. So we find what? Our adjoint. So in doing that, the first row will become the first column. So we have minus 1, minus 3, minus 1. Then the second row will become the second column. So we have minus 10, minus 3, and then 8. And then the third row will become what? The third column. So we have 4, 3, and then negative 5. The last step that we are going to look at is what? To use the formula A inverse is equal to 1 all over the determinant multiplied by what? The adjoint of what? Matrix A. So we are just going to substitute all what we have done into this formula. So we have our A inverse, or inverse of A is equal to 1. All over the determinant, we had what? Minus 9. So we have minus 9 multiplied by what? The adjoint. So the adjoint, we had minus 1, and then we have negative 3. So this is the inverse of matrix A. You can continue to simplify by expanding the bracket, but better still you can leave it in this very form, as easy as that. So this is how we find the inverse of a 3 by 3 matrix. This brings us to the end of today's lesson. So this is your tutorial set questions. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.